Welcome to our presentation today. My name is Feleti, and I am the Director of Development for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at the University of Utah. I'll quickly share with you my not mine, but the two colleagues I'm with. The first is Janzell Tutor. She's been at the University of Utah for 16 years, doing everything from student services to now managing the alumni relations for the College of Nursing for over 5 years. Also, we have Gabi Sanchez-Jones. She is the manager of alumni clubs and diverse communities. Gabi has also been very involved with community development and several community boards directly addressing equity and diversity. Just some house items that we want to go over real quickly. First of all, you can, so on Zoom, there are some buttons at the bottom. One is called participants. If you had a comment or wanted to raise your hand, you can click on the reactions button and raise your hand, and we will try to get to you. If there's a lot of conversation, it might be a little bit more difficult, and we'll get to you as we are able. But as you raise your hand will remain raised until you lower your hand. So we ask that, once we address whatever it is that we're talking about, that you lower your hand after it has been addressed. You are also free to comment in the chat, because we will also be monitoring the chat and some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. We're asking for your engagement, even though we're presenting as experts in this area. This is a very young group and topic, and so we really want participation from you. And then lastly, we ask that we be respectful, and we're not anticipating that's going to be an issue here, but we want to make sure that we state that up front, that we be respectful towards each other. And if you see something, or if you hear something, or you feel like it's not in line, there's ways to talk about your disagreements or our disagreements and still being respectful. All right, now that I've briefly gone over some of the house items and I've briefly gone over the introductions, I think, so we were supposed to go over some of the items in the chat. It looks like, according to what I see, there's very few, but a lot of people enjoyed highlighting diverse donors at all levels, and we are going to talk about that today. That's definitely part of the conversation. Recognition that not everyone can afford the big money contributions. That is also a really big deal, a really big part of the conversations we're going to be having today. And so that looks like the main comments. If there's others that you'd like to share with us, that'd be great also. So we do have a question we want to ask, and I'm okay with silence. And the question is, what does philanthropy mean to you? And if you could put in the chat one word or even a sentence, what philanthropy means to you, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that.
Also, as you're adding that, will you, if you want, turn your camera on? I know you can't see each other. You probably can't even see yourself, but we can see you as the panelists. So I can see Kate and Rich. Hello. If the rest of you would like to turn your cameras on, we'd love to see your smiling faces as well. But yes, please. What does philanthropy mean to you?
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for waving.
Also, raise your hand in the participant function. We can unmute you if you would rather just have it be conversational. This is a pretty small group, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that protection. I think we'll be okay here, but just be mindful to mute yourself when you're done speaking.
Okay, I see. Connecting society's wealth to some of its most pressing challenges, and the keynote. I think that was a very strong point in the keynote. Janzell and Gabi, you want to read from there also?
Sure. Sorry, I was not unmuted. Also, Susan, I was just going to write, I think it is just like a normal Zoom function. So I'm not sure how to help you with the camera piece of that. I'm sorry. Let's see. Francie says community collaboration. Yes, definitely. And we'll talk about that today. Supporting the community via initiatives you care about, from Heather Brown. Yes, I love it. Gabby, go ahead.
Yes, and Rich, who is a former colleague of mine from UHealth, so I'm so excited that you're here. Rich mentioned that you can give to organizations because you believe that they will support, because you believe in the support they will provide to people, which is essential. Susan mentioned advancing and amplifying the work that we do at the U, driven by mission, programs, and people. And Lindsay mentioned philanthropy is change making, resource sharing to help individuals via organizations.
And then Katie put promoting good causes and the welfare of others. I think these are all really great comments about what philanthropy is or can be. And I think our keynotes, certainly shared the many ways in which philanthropy is. But now we want to ask the question, so why does diversity and race equity matter in philanthropy? And I think the keynotes also kind of touch base on this, but why? And what does this mean when we're thinking about philanthropy? And I think certainly some of the things we shared in the chat has a little bit to do with this, but I'd like to hear your thoughts about maybe some of the nuances of that. Why does diversity and race equity matter in philanthropy? I see some folks' fingers moving. Philanthropy must also advance equity and justice, which this year has demonstrated more than ever. Absolutely, because, and that was from Susan Anderson. Mercedes Ward, because a lot of the reason why inequities exist is because of the historical underinvestment. Thank you, is it Mercedes or Mercedes? Rich Polikoff, it matters because the broader the donor / supporter pool, the broader the beneficiary pool. I'm thinking about that. That's very interesting. Kate Thronberg, representation of our current and future student body. Oh, we're definitely going to be talking about that today. Lisa Jimones, it matters in everything truly. So philanthropy should reflect the rich diversity in our world. We will all be better for that. And I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely true. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to share some personal experiences in our philanthropy work. And as you know, the way we thought about it, or the way I think about it, is there's sort of this individual work that we do in development, right? Working with individuals. Then there's this sort of, we're going to call it 1,000-foot view. And there's also a 2,000-foot view, meaning, today the keynotes, I think we're talking like from a 2,000 and up foot view, like the bigger policy impacts and, working through research grants and stuff like that. We're going to be a little bit more closer to the ground in our conversation today, but, each of us are going to sort of share our personal experiences. So we'll begin with Gabby.
Thank you. So like Feleti said, we kind of wanted to start by tackling this really big issue by defining philanthropy, which is a tricky word because it has all these historical contexts. So even our keynote panelists today, they're notarized by these big names in American history, like Rockefeller, Carnegie, things like that, that are really noteworthy and have the history of philanthropy. But when we look at philanthropy just from the scope of human interaction, we actually see that it's this really amazing system that we have integrated into every culture and religion around the world, where people generally just believe in contributing to their community. They believe in helping those in need. And if they are able, they will do their part because they care. And that's something that's so essential. But when we talk about racial equity and philanthropy, we have to acknowledge the power that comes with philanthropic responsibility and philanthropic giving.
I think it's Janzell
It's you and then it's me.
Oh, it's me. We have this scripted out. I apologize. So as Gabi is talking about the institutions that are participating in this philanthropy, right? From my point of view, I'm doing a lot of individual phone calls. We identify, who has given in the past, who has shown interest in some of the activities or issues that we're talking about. And so, here in Utah, or particularly at the University of Utah, it may seem like, in some ways that we're really young in terms of participating in this work of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And even though, the university has tried to, or has made many efforts to address equity, diversity, and inclusion, for example, creating centers. So, this week, I was having a conversation with an organization at the University of Utah about the history of some of our units at the University of Utah. So, for example, the Center for Ethnic Student Affairs, the LGBT Resource Center. These organizations have been around a lot longer, and we are creating other organizations. So, for example, the Black Cultural Center, but the American Indian Resource Center has also been around for a while. But we've really never had a position that is just primarily working in trying to cultivate relationships with alumni or even individuals in our community to ask about, how, so when I call people, I introduce myself and I say, I'd like to know about, for example, this individual gave to the American Indian Resource Center. I want to find out, okay, why did you give to the American Indian Resource Center, and what was important to you about the American Indian Resource Center that you gave? And I've had some very rich conversations with individuals. The interesting thing to me is a lot of times people are telling me, when we think about philanthropy, and the reason why we asked about, give us a definition of philanthropy, a lot of individuals that I talk to who have never been engaged before on this issue will say to me, hey, you're talking to the wrong people. I don't have any money. I'm poor. Or maybe not even not poor, but maybe, I don't have the means to have a huge impact. But I think if there's anything that you take away from our meeting today is that every way of engaging matters. Everything that you do. So in this particular instance, this person wanted to make a difference by giving some blankets to the American Indian Resource Center. And that makes a difference. And we've got them engaged, right? And I think that this community, because we haven't been as focused on reaching out to them and finding out what things matter to them, they're not used to it right now, right? So we're building that right now by reaching out to individuals and asking them, what things matter to them, and we're finding really. The word that comes to my mind is a really rich community who we need to cultivate and grow. So that's my little thing.
Thanks, Feleti. And as he kind of was saying, I want to talk about the individual level and how important it is for each of us to make this commitment. So I work at the College of Nursing right now, and I attended this awesome College of Nursing, like across the nation, diversity symposium. And the national speaker, the keynote speaker, had this like yin and yang image. I should have put it up on a slide now that I think about it, but the one talked about like all the things that are happening right now, what kinds of movements we have, like all of the national, global pandemic type things, like all of these things we're working on and are so hard to understand, and we're trying to figure it out. And then on the other side was individual commitment. And together, that's how we're going to make it work, is if we as individuals really have this personal commitment to get into the work, to understand what's happening, around us, but how I as an individual can have an impact. then that's how that yin and yang will happen, where even if we think we're a small person in the bucket, we can still chip away at those bigger movements that need to happen. So that individual level is so important. And then also I've been thinking about, like Feleti just asked, Mercedes, is it Mercedes or is it Mercedes? Please tell us.
Hi, actually it's Mercedes.
Mercedes, even, yes, thank you, Mercedes.
Thanks for asking.
Yes, well, yeah, and that's so important, right? So that individual level of connecting as well, especially when we're talking about race equity and philanthropy. If you're a fundraiser, trying to get to know someone, or if you're, just an individual person trying to get to know someone, really, and having this connection, this community connection, to get to do the work together, is really understanding who these people are and getting their names correct. So I appreciate you sharing with us how you say your name, as well as, I got in late to the program this afternoon, to the panel, and I really appreciated the piece about us describing ourselves as part of our accessibility, right? So there are so many steps as an individual that we can take. So I like to say, I've shared this with a couple of you, but when I present, sometimes I say, I am Hawaiian, Chinese, Korean, Norwegian. Like I say that I'm this woman, that now I can share that I have brown hair with like this weird poof thing at the top and bright pink lips and a bright pink shirt, because I like bright colors and bright nails. But like that description, right, helps accessibility, but also helps us to connect. Like that's the main purpose of explaining who we are, or the main connection of developing this relationship, is getting to the core of who each other are, and no matter their ability, that we can make that connection. So I think on that individual level, the other thing I wanted to say is, Francie, in the chat, you said, the definition of philanthropy is a desire to improve the well-being of others. I think you probably Googled that, because it is, right, the definition, the well-being of others, and it's far greater than money. So it's not only this fundraising piece that so often we go to, raising funds for philanthropy, but it's the welfare of others. And that can mean so many different things. So that individual level, I think, also is so important as we think about it.
So I think right now, Janzell, what we're moving to is you're going to be sharing some of the demographics and how that's going to make a big difference for us, particularly here in the state of Utah.
Thanks, Gabi. So first, we want to start with a couple of slides that talk about demographics at the University of Utah. I'm not sure if all of us, let's see, it looks like actually all of us probably do work at the institution. But we're going to start with the student enrollment. So you can see the growth over time from 14 to 18. This is the most recent data that we got so far. And sometimes it's hard to read these graphs, but you can see on the far left going all the way towards the right, that's the white population. And then on the left here, you can see that's about 68% in 2018, and so on and so forth. I always tend to lean towards disaggregating data. So it's hard for me to do the 2 or more, because you really don't identify, like I said, I'm a Hawaiian, Chinese, Korean, Norwegian woman, and I really would rather identify, my main identity is Native Hawaiian. I was born and raised in Hawaii, so I'd rather actually identify as Native Hawaiian, so that on the books, that I'm a Native Hawaiian at this school, right? But because I am multiracial and I'm proud of that, I always click on the box that says 2 or more. And so you don't really get to capture all of the correct demographics. So today I really appreciated, I think her name was Corey from TIAA-CREF, when she was talking about data and how it's something that we really need to focus on, because it helps to keep us honest as we talk through these things. But also that's something that we all need to understand, again, that individual level. And it's because we all have a role in solving whatever the issue might be. So again, it's just a part of collecting this data, which is so important, but trying to understand what data we're actually collecting and why, and should things be more disaggregated and not. So you can see kind of where the enrollment is for the institution. And then on the next slide, you can see the demographics for the faculty. And unfortunately, we didn't have the exact breakdown in percentages, but you can kind of see how we are growing the growth of our diversity in our faculty. And you saw on the last slide, the growth in our student population also by way of race and ethnicity has been growing. But it's also, if you notice on the last one, I think it was like 18% Latinx And this, it doesn't have the percentage again, like I said, but it looks way small, right? The dark green here for Latinx faculty members. So it's not really proportionate as you see our growth. So it is also important to understand what data we're collecting, but then also, of course, what the data means and is telling us and what work we still have to do. So go ahead to the next slide. I've shared this before, I think some of you have seen it, but this Utah demographics is an interesting thing to talk about. So I like to say that in 2045 is kind of the year that I've been using, we will, as the United States, become a minority majority, meaning those who identify as a minority group, underrepresented group, those people will actually become the majority of the population in the United States. This graph actually shows you the Utah population. So again, the data is a little bit old from 2015. We tried to get newer ones, but the Chem C. Gardner policy, this is what they have so far. So in 2015, you can see the data there at the top. And then by 2065, you can see that we are improving in our diversity. I say improving because that's the goal, right? So we are improving in the demographics of Utah. And you can see how we're improving. I mean, obviously it's not as fast as we want to see it, as at least I would like to see it grow, but you do see the growth over time. And if you go to the next slide, it kind of highlights what is there on the left. It talks about, the white population in 2015 being at this number, and then the average annual rate of change being a 0.9% rate of change for whites, and then Black or African American being actually a 2.8% average annual rate of change. And then you can see the list as it goes down. Of course, I want to point out Native Hawaiians will grow by 1.9% annually, and two or more races 3.3% annually. So you can see that this is, another thing that I say frequently is diversity being a choice. When we talk about diversity being a fact, that this is already happening, right? That we're in this world of diversity, and these numbers prove those things. So go ahead to the next one. This top line, this gray line, talks about the United States growth trajectory, and then the red line is the Utah. And the thing we wanted to point out here is that the rate at which the United States grows is so much faster than the way that the Utah is growing. And say that in the context of what we're going to talk about today, in that maybe in the state of Utah, people are either taking longer to make change, to have to become more educated, to hear stories of others. One, because I think that obviously we have a lower population. We've already seen that of maybe your neighbors who you might be able to, get to know. But also maybe the older population might not have had that experience over time, right? So if you're looking at 1980, to 2020, there is, the 2000 to 2020, that kind of steep increase there, which is great. But it's still not, I think, fast enough for us to do the work that we need to do for us to really understand what's happening in our society and who we are talking to and what communities need our help. Again, that welfare of others. Go ahead to the next one. Again, here's another chart with the US versus Utah, and you can see the different population changes by the national level and then the Utah level, and how we're going to change there. All right, go ahead to the next one. Okay, and I think the next thing, we just go straight to Gabi.
Thank you, Janzell, for that very fantastic presentation. So as was mentioned, I work for the Alumni Relations Office, and I will be giving a presentation today about our Diverse Alumni Communities program. Our mission, specifically with this program at Alumni Relations, is directly tied into the overall strategic mission of the institution, specifically expanding outreach and engagement to shape and improve the U. And I really love this quote that's on the slide, because it reminds us that we aren't just doing this to keep up with our peers. We aren't just doing this to be politically correct in the higher education scope. We're actually doing this because this is the most sustainable method for alumni engagement in the future. So while our Alumni Communities program is newer to the University of Utah, we know that this is not new within our higher education industry. So prior to establishing our communities, and as we've continued to develop them, we studied a lot of peer institutions to better understand how they were already actively working to engage diverse alumni. These institutions included many of the Ivy League schools, schools around the country, and then we took special note, of course, to our colleagues in the Pac-12. When we did this research, we found some commonalities between the institutions, one being that they had some communities and affinity groups that were most common, including the LGBTQ+ community, Latinx, veterans, Black and African American, Asian American. That being said, it should be noted many institutions took the initiative to create really specific affinity groups that met the unique demographics of their region in the United States based off of immigrant populations or other demographic information. When we looked at their programs, we were able to gather some really great ideas of things that were working for them, including opportunities for engagement through websites and Facebook groups. We saw that generally speaking, their connection back to the institution was focused on mentorship and student-related programming, tying directly into fundraising. Scholarships for students who had similar experiences to them were the most popular scholarship and fundraising initiatives that they took on as a group. Many institutions also have development staff who are specifically housed in advancement who focus on diversity and next generation giving. And many have mission and vision statements for their affinity groups to help alumni know exactly why these programs exist and how they can serve them. I want to highlight just two institutions that really stood out to us in our research, one being the University of Wisconsin, which conducts yearly affinity surveys within their communities program. They have developed a strategic plan to engage diverse alumni over the next 5 to 10 years. And they host a lot of focus groups to better understand student experiences on campus, but I think most importantly, to understand engagement up until this point with their alumni association. Another institution that stood out to me was Princeton University, and that they were able to have strong enough affinity groups that outside of their immediate region of their campus, they're able to host successful events for their alumni around the country because their program is so robust. In addition to that, they do a really good job of making sure that they highlight diverse and young alumni within their own marketing material. So looking at our own program here at the University of Utah, I know many of you may be familiar with this. I know I've worked with some of you on this, but we currently have 8 communities established. The first 6 are identity-based, and TRIO and Beehive Honor Society should be noted that those are our first communities that are more centered around programs that students were in at the University of Utah versus identity. The first 6 of these were initially established in June of 2019. It requires a self-identification process with our alumni. And one of our many benefits for this program is that we are able to operate it similarly to our alumni clubs, which is our geographical and regional engagement. This means that we have staff members like myself who oversee these programs. We operate each of our communities, like our clubs, with board members of alumni leaders. We have really clear expectations with them so that alumni know how to best engage with us, how the institution can support them, how we can work together to create sustainable transition between alumni leaders and hopefully create a program that will just last a long time beyond immediate interest. As mentioned, it is a self-identification process, which is probably one of our biggest challenges, truthfully. These are our numbers from just a couple weeks ago, and we know that this is nowhere near representative of our actual alumni who fit into these identities, but we are slowly trying to build that organic growth as we invite people to be leaders, to invite their friends, and hopefully pick up interest. I do want to highlight the large difference between veterans and LGBT and our other ones, just as a chance that this gives us to reflect on intersectionality, the importance that it takes in engagement and philanthropy, and also that it gives us a chance to really think about how we can provide meaningful engagement to all of our alumni across all of our communities, as well as meaningful engagement to each of the identities. So looking to the future, this is the roadmap that we established a while ago, and we are still currently working through it. We move in one direction, but we constantly come back and move again. So we've been able to host focus groups and continue to host focus groups with our alumni who have joined these communities to better understand their experiences as a student and their experience with our alumni programming up to date. We've also worked to establish goals and work with our Board of Governors to achieve those goals. We've established programs in conjunction with campus partners and community organizations, and we consistently try to measure our success, and we're always looking to adapt and improve. I want to take a minute to highlight some of our campus partners. which include TRIO and Benyon Center, University Neighborhood Partners, Hinckley Institute of Politics, the Veteran Support Center. I know there are many other centers that we constantly are in communication with, but that being said, if you have an area of campus that you represent and you think could partner with this program, we would love to hear from you. You can contact me directly and we can find a way to integrate better together. One of our huge partners as well is Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I will turn the time over to Feleti to kind of discuss our partnership together in this work.
I forgot I was on mute. Thank you, Gabby. You've done such a great job. And I do want to recognize, I saw in the chat, Susan Anderson and Lindsay Nilsson. We need diverse donors who understand the situations of diverse groups of individuals. The broader the scope of our philanthropists we work with, the more people we can help. Susan Anderson says, in addition to the individual work you are addressing, are there plans in that 1U way to bundle various programs on campus that are addressing EDI to leverage larger funding opportunities, and how might that work? Those are two just really great questions. And as we began our journey to do this presentation, a couple of questions we asked are why diversity and racial equity matters in philanthropy. Obviously, earlier in the meeting today, we asked what is philanthropy? And we know from our conversation that philanthropy is many things. It's not just giving money. It's really getting people to participate, to civically engage, right? To whether that be through financing or that just be volunteering or, just advocating for our programs. And then, we wanted to share, as Janzell has done, the reason why this is important is because our world is changing. And we are a fairly young, the university is fairly young at, directly or primarily engaging in this work. And so we wanted to share some examples with you here. And so, bundling various programs, I can share with you that we have this year, for example, I'll give the George Floyd Memorial Fund is an example of collaborating. We met with ASUU, we met with student organizations, especially student organizations that were directly impacted by the killing of George Floyd. And, all of us got together and we were able to have what I would describe as a successful fundraising effort. And we were able to talk to people about their feelings about what happened and, how they wanted to make a difference. And so that's just one example of, working together. Another example is for Black History Month. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the Black Cultural Center, but that's only, I think it's the second 2.5 years it's been in existence, if I'm remembering correctly. But, for Black History Month, it used to be that, one group would be responsible for all the activities that have to do with Black History Month here on this campus. And it's just not, it's not sustainable. And so what the director, Malaysia Garfield, did is he reached out to as many units to find out what activities these units are doing to recognize or honor Black History Month. And then instead of him individually just making those programs, they call it convening. We convened all the organizations and then shared the information about what we're doing on this campus to honor Black History Month. And that's sort of the model that we're moving forward in, but it's still so brand new, right? And, when we saw the statistics that Gabi shared about people participating in affinity groups, I think that's also another indicator of how young we are. So this has got to be, it can't be a one-time thing. This has to be long-term thinking. How do we include, how do we get involved? And so I really like that question from Susan Anderson. can we bundle various programs on campus that are addressing EDI? And I do love Gabi, making that challenge. Your organizations, are there things that we could be doing together? Even the School of Fine Arts for Martin Luther King week, for those of you who were able to participate, they did a whole activity around Martin Luther King, and we shared in that, building that together. And so we are definitely going to be getting better. And Gabi shared, and I the different organizations. So equity, diversity, and inclusion, for those of you that don't know, I've been here long enough that I know the history, but it used to be called, when I first came here in 2004, it used to be called the Office of Diversity. And we had an associate vice president. The next associate vice president for diversity changed it to the Office for Equity and Diversity. And then when Catherine Stockton came in, she changed it to the Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. As vice president, inaugural vice president, Marianne Villarreal came in. She has now, it's no longer called the office. It's what we're trying to make this a 1U, and it's now just called Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the University of Utah. So this is, we're trying to infuse equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the entire campus. And, as your offices are doing things or would like to collaborate or work together, we are certainly open to that. And in equity, diversity, and inclusion, you have the LGBT Resource Center, the LGBTQ Resource Center, the Center for Ethnic Student Affairs, the Black Cultural Center, the American Indian Resource Center, and then health, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Yes, I think maybe I've addressed those questions.
Feleti, if I can add, I think one of the wonderful things that we have when we talk about the intersectionality of our communities is that, all of those organizations, they fit under EDI, and we have so many other partners who are in student affairs or other areas on campus who are actively working to provide support to marginalized communities and students on campus. And when we transition those students to alumni and then hopefully to donors, we need to think about providing the same support that they received here on campus that made that transformational experience to them. And that being said, we provide our communities, we provide space for them to discuss those specific experiences, knowing that historic programming at majority white institutions is different than it is for BIPOC alumni or other marginalized groups. However, the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion is not exclusive to BIPOC folks. It's not exclusive to marginalized communities either. So when we talk about ways to engage philanthropically, we can always extend the invitation to our allies in the community, which I think is such an important aspect of this conversation as we move forward, of remembering that, Latinx community is like, I'm a Latina, that matters most to me because of my identity, but if my rights are not just an issue for me to fight for, they're an issue for my allies and peers and colleagues to fight for as well. So how can we invite folks to make sure that we are all engaging in the work, regardless of how it personally impacts us?
Thanks, Gabi. And I wanted to share a story of a student of mine. He just graduated from the College of Nursing, and he was sharing how when he first started at the institution, he's a Latino man, and he got involved with diversity scholars, so at the Center for Ethnic Student Affairs, and just loved his experience. It became his home. It was his friends. Like, he figured out how to navigate this very large system because of the Center for Ethnic Student Affairs. And then he got accepted into the College of Nursing, and it became his junior and senior years of his program. And moving physically, geographically from main campus where all of his undergrad classes were, and having a safe space with CESA, then physically moving all of his classes and his clinical work and all of these things up to health campus started to create this divide. So then he started losing those connections, right? Started losing that welfare, that benefit of him succeeding, and his group, his family, his home, his safe space. He couldn't get there anymore. He didn't have that same experience being on the health campus. So that is something that we are starting to address now, to create that same kind of space for our health students as well. But so he describes it as, you know, he still credits all of his success now that he's graduated. And we heard from President Watkins today. I wrote it down because I thought it was so great. She said, education has a huge role to play in race equity and philanthropy, but the benefits occur when they actually complete their degree. And that is another thing, is if we are creating these opportunities for us to engage with people along their educational journey, then hopefully they will stay to complete their degree as we provide resources. But then as Gabi's presenting, what things are we offering them later after they graduate? And these alumni, community alumni programs are part of that answer. So the student, and now alumni, you know, graduated and now has really credited all of his success because of CESA. So I've been, you know, I met him on his last year and talked to him and all these things. And now I'm concerned for his welfare, right? I am in this philanthropic journey with him. One, because I wear the hat as a director of alumni relations, but two, because I care about him, and three, because I care about his welfare, right? So now I'm trying to understand what his journey was and now where his journey will go. So I just appreciate so much that Gabi and the University of Utah have this program that can capture him, and he can find that home again and that space. And that, I think, is part of this race equity piece when we talk about philanthropy, that it's not only fundraising. And, you know, my colleague and I like to say, when you meet us as fundraisers, of course, that's part of our job, is to raise money, right? Like that, as a fundraiser, that's part of our job. But really, our job is to create relationships and to give you resources. And I think having these resources like these community alumni programs is a part of those resources. Today, and I'm glad to see Francie here today, but she and I and another colleague of ours had another opportunity to speak, and we were talking about how fundraisers approach people of color for funds, right, for giving, and how sometimes those things are actually can be a turnoff in the way that we request funds, or when we start thinking and wearing our almost white Western philanthropic fundraising hat when we go to communities of color and to people of color to ask them for funds. So I think it is a large conversation as we talk about, one, the welfare of someone, and then two, when fundraisers actually approach people, and if we're not really fully thinking of the welfare of them personally and how they might fit into society, how they feel like they belong, and then we ask them for money, where is the disconnect there, and how we're asking them for money and for what? I think Rich early in the comments talked about that, right? Like what is the impact for the larger community too, when we're asking for the impact for them, showing them the impact individually. And Feleti, Gabi, and I, in our process of preparing for this, started going down this path of talking about us individually in our communities, and how we see philanthropy working. I was reminiscing about when I got married years and years ago, and how I was so surprised how people opened their wallets and opened their hearts to me and my husband, and wrote checks for, $50, wrote checks for $100, wrote checks for $200. And these were people that I didn't know, right? And collectively, that was a huge impact to start our lives. And they weren't doing anything for them. They were doing literally just for me and my husband, right? For our lives. It wasn't to impact the community. It was to help me. And Francie and I today we're talking about how in some communities, not even writing a check is the way you give, right? You're inviting people to have a meal with you. That is the way that you support them and that you give. And that also is philanthropy in the way that you're embracing people and helping them along their way. So Gabi and Feleti, will you also share with us how you and your community work?
You stole my thunder. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's really so philanthropy is first of all, it's a very difficult word to say if you don't say it very often. And I remember the first time I heard the word philanthropy, I kind of understood what it meant. I knew it had to do with raising money, but when you talk to our communities, or at least my communities, and now I'm getting really down to the individual, right, family communities, we've been doing philanthropy. We just didn't call it philanthropy. And an example of that may be, so in my family, I grew up in a Samoan family. If a funeral happens, extended family, and I'll tell you, my grandparents, they had 18 children. Out of the 18 children, I want to say 4 married other Samoans, the rest married white Americans. And it was a foreign concept for their partners that when a funeral came up, they were expected to give something. And my grandfather used to say, give me $1, give me $10, $20, but you know, people gave what they could, and it would take care of a funeral. It would take care of a wedding. It would take care of somebody's hard times. But they didn't call it philanthropy. They just saw it as an obligation. And I like some of the definitions here in the chat. It's because we're trying to help somebody out. And in this context, we're talking about the greater society, right? How do we get everybody to participate? And like I said in my individual calls, because this hasn't been a traditional thing that we've done, is reach out to individuals and talk to them about, you know, some of the things that have to do with diversity. And you know, I've had calls where individuals told me, you know, I'll only talk to you, but I hated my experience at the University of Utah. I had racist experience. I felt, you know, belittled in class and all these kinds of things, but I'm still listening. I'm still listening. And then I'm saying things like, okay, that was a terrible experience. What are some of your thoughts about how we can make this a better place? We're trying to make it a better place. And that shift allows individuals to participate. And that's what we want. We want people to participate and stay engaged. And if we can do that, that makes our campus better. It also increases our ability to engage in philanthropic ways. And see, philanthropic, that's even a real difficult mouthful of a word to say, but yeah, that's sort of our call to action to you. And I do like the question, you know, how do we work together? And you know, I may not have that direct answer immediately, but I do have the answer that we want to. Gabi wants to, Janzell, our group wants to, and
Well,
we can make
I
this.
would say conversations. Like let's start with a conversation.
Yeah.
We don't have the solution, but we can start by having a conversation about it.
Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Let's begin those conversations, and let's figure out together, you know, what can we do to make to improve and increase and be able to give people the opportunity to participate, and also make our campus better and make the community better. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Just speaking from my own experience, I resonate very closely to what Feleti shared. You'll notice my last name has 2 parts to it. I'm married to a white man from Utah. And similar to what Janzell said, you know, through the process of getting married and other experiences we've had with my extended family, there is quite a disconnect between a culture of giving. And while for my immediate family and to my parents, for example, it seems a little foreign that I would, you know, I serve on the board of some local community organizations. So I make minor contributions, but I do make my board contributions. I do try to donate to the community, to organizations that resonate with me. And that feels a little foreign to my parents who are immigrants here, who used all of their resources to help their children and to help their immediate family be able to establish themselves and find some sort of level of comfort in the United States. And so as we transition to philanthropy for that next generation, which I think is really essential, we talk a little bit more about the fact that we know about sacrifice, we know about people giving up minimal resources to help the future. And now we have a future generation of students who are coming out who may be better positioned to make some small contributions. And we absolutely want to encourage them to know that their gift has power, no matter how small it is. Their contribution and their willingness to engage in any sort of capacity, whether it's joining an alumni board and talking to us about their experience, creating programming, and helping us connect them to centers on campus that help students like them. All of that gives them a seat at the table and helps us change the landscape of power and privilege that exists within philanthropy. So my call to action for all of you is just to keep this program in mind, keep our alumni communities in mind. If you have a donor, if you have alumni within the scope or area that you work in the institution who identifies into one of these communities, I would love to meet with them. I would love to talk to them about what we hope this program can do for them and what this program can do for current students. That being said, if you also want to partner with us in any way, like we are always here, our door is open to, our Zoom door is open to chat at any time to talk about how this works, because especially from my perspective, I work for the Alumni Relations Office. We encapsulate all of campus. So we want this to be representative of people from all different areas, colleges, industries, and also outside of the state of Utah. We are very aware that we have many diverse alumni who leave the state of Utah for many reasons, and we want to find a way that's meaningful to engage them with our institution.
Thank you, Gabby. And yeah, Francie, I like what you're saying here in the chat, and we talked about it a little bit today. So Francie says there seems to be a disconnect between sharing and giving. I come from a culture that places the importance on sharing. And we talked about giving money is hands off, right? You give the money and then the institution takes it, right? Like, or the nonprofit takes it. But if you're sharing in that need or in that growth, whatever it is that you're doing with the person that you're, what's the right word here? That you are consumed. That's not the right word. There's another word, but that you are, caring so much about their welfare, wherever it is that you're sharing with them, that you're doing it together, that my resources are your resources. My spirit is with your spirit, right? That we're in this together. And I think that is part of that individual piece that I spoke about earlier, that as we start to really, continue along our individual journeys and see these things and have conversations like Francie and I had today to really start opening your eyes to your right. If I just give money, I'm just giving and then that's it. Like I have no place in that. But really, I want to connect on that individual to individual level with the person or the impact that I might be making somewhere else. Depending on what it is that I have passion for, right? So, I guess my call to action would be to start to internalize what your individual efforts are. What do they mean? What are you doing to improve yourself along your journey in equity, diversity, inclusion, and understanding that for you and yourself? But also, I love this idea of sharing, like how can you restructure your framework from giving to sharing. I love that, Francie. Thank you so much.
Well, we wanted to have more time for Q&A, and I'm sure you have lots of questions, but we appreciate your time with us. Can we put our emails down there? I mean, I'll put my email down there. Yeah. And if you wanted to reach out to me to talk about, ways that we can work together, I really would welcome that. That would be great. And I have tons of stories of, some challenges that come up in calling individuals, because we don't have a natural alum, right? It's equity, diversity, and inclusion, but you can't look that up in what do we call it now? Unite. You can't look up equity, diversity, inclusion. It's not a major. You can't just call people up because they have different looking names. There has to be a logic for reaching out. So appreciate the work that you're all doing and appreciate your time. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Stay safe and thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, see ya.
Everyone.